Hello, my name's Isaac from Orgonite. Today, we're going to be learning how to make Orgonite. Here are the required materials that you're going to need. Number 1, epoxy. Number 2 are metals. Number 3 are quartz crystals. That's the basic makeup of any Orgonite piece. You can always add on with more things. We're also going to need our mold. We're going to need our cups to pour the resin. We're going to need stir sticks. We're going to also need denatured alcohol. This isn't necessary, but it's really going to help you. And then, there's a couple other things like our colors that we're going to use, but that's just about it. Also, don't forget your safety equipment. You're going to want some gloves, and you're going to want a mask. Something that filters particulates. I traditionally use a respirator, but for the sake of the video, this helps me talk a lot easier. Step 1 is going to be cleaning out our molds and making sure that they're ready to go. So this is where blue shop towels will come really well in handy as well. And then our denatured alcohol. Just pour a little bit onto the rag and then go at it. Make sure it's super clean. You don't want to have anything stuck in there because you'll just end up getting it on your pyramid. It'll just stick to the inside of it, and you don't want that. I recommend getting molds from phimolds.com. I'll link it down below in the description. They have very good quality molds, and everything they have is sacred geometry. And I don't really trust Amazon pyramid molds. The slope ratios are a little weird. And also, I've had a lot of the silicone molds stick to the pyramid, and that's really not good. Step 2 is going to be mixing our epoxy. This is where we're going to want to put our gloves on and put our mask on. The fumes from epoxy are not safe to breathe, which is why you also want to do this in a well-ventilated area. It's not the end of the world, but you'll stink up your house. You probably shouldn't do it. Inside your home, you can always do it outside as long as there's no rain that's going to be involved. But make sure it's dry and also make sure it's warm. You want your area to be about 60 to 80 degrees so the epoxy can cure properly. If it's too cold, it won't cure right. And if it's too hot, it'll cure too fast. You want to make sure that your epoxy itself is warm enough. You don't want it to be hard before you pour it. Otherwise, it's going to be really difficult to mix. You also don't want it to be too hot because in that case, it will just cure way too fast. This epoxy is super clear, commercial grade epoxy. Really good quality stuff. I'd recommend using it. This also uses a 1-to-1 ratio. We're going to start with 200 milliliters of the part B. Always mix part B first. Make sure it goes up to the first amount that you need. I end up going a little over the 200 mark, so I'm going to end up going a little over the 400 mark for the second one too. Part 1 is in. That's where we mix part 2. Always mix part B first and then part A second. And then we'll get it up to the 400 mark or a little bit past. Now that that's in, our next step is going to be mixing it. You can see inside of here, epoxy ends up looking stringy almost. This is where you have to really mix it in good. Make sure that you don't see any of the strings left or else it's not going to cure the right way. Just keep on mixing. It's going to take a solid, 4 or 5 minutes. Do this with your stick so you get all of those strings off. Keep on mixing away. And I'll cut back to when I'm done. All right, when your resin is nice and mixed, this is where it's going to come time to do the additives. I'm going to put atomic ore mist inside of here. It is a monoatomic gold that increases the conductivity of the resin and allows the orgone energy to flow much better. This is a capsule form. You don't need a capsule form. You can use just a normal liquid ore mist too. Suspended Solutions is the brand that I use, and I really tend to like them. I've used a couple other brands, but they're not the best. There you go. This white powder mixed in. Also make sure, you'll start to see bubbles form inside the epoxy, which is totally fine. You just want to make sure that it's nice and well mixed. You'll be able to get those bubbles out later with the heat gun. So keep mixing. And then when we're at the point to where it looks pretty thoroughly mixed, this is when we're going to add our colors. Today we're going to do a pink pyramid. So I'm going to add like, let's say like 10 drops roughly. Start mixing. And also I want to put a little bit of sparkles in here. So powders and liquid dyes both work plenty fine. You can always mix the two of them together. Amazon's got a bunch of really good types of dyes and stuff that you can find. And then just keep mixing this guy. See that right there? So when we're done with this step, we're going to want to get our mold back out. And the first thing that I like to do, mix a little bit more. You can never mix too much. Just make sure it doesn't start getting warm inside the cup, because that's when the curing process will start. You traditionally have like 20, 30 minutes, depending on the heat, until your epoxy starts to cure. So don't mix up too much resin. I've done that before, because you need to be able to do it batch by batch in a sense. So a good way to make sure that you have enough coverage is by pouring along the edges of your piece. That way you get all the epoxy along the ends, and it'll start to collect in the middle there. What I like to do first, which isn't necessary, but I like to start by adding my quartz crystal. So I'll put this guy right in the center there. This is a big one. You don't have to have something of this size for the crystal. You can do anything like a little more than an inch is perfect. You don't want it too small though, because it's just not enough crystal for the pyramid. So once this guy's added in, we're gonna add a little bit more epoxy to give us some room. And here's the one thing in my Orgonite creations and proper Orgonite creations that people don't often follow, is that the amount of metal has to be very significant. Like, I would just say pack it in completely full of metals. I'm using steel and copper today, but you can use really whatever metals you'd like. Each one has a different effect on the piece. Steel and copper do tend to work really well together though. Here's a table of the metals, their properties, and the effects that it has on the Orgonite. Make sure it's properly mixed in. Make sure that you don't have any air pockets that don't have epoxy in there, because when you're pouring the metals, sometimes the metals just like to clump up and not let the epoxy in. So just keep mixing in there. Make sure you got everything fully covered. Then keep adding your metals, just more and more. You're going to want this thing to just completely drink up your metal. It's going to take quite a lot. But that's really the only way to make proper Orgonite. If you have if you have blank spots of epoxy that don't have any steel or copper, that's just not right. The orgone doesn't flow properly, so you really just want to have as much as you possibly can in there. Some people like to use powders. I've heard from people that it doesn't work right. The shaving should be like just small, but not like powderized, if that makes sense. Add some more epoxy. Keep mixing her in there. Add some more metals. Just a back and forth action for the most part with this. So one thing about epoxy is that traditionally you don't want to pour too thick of layers, because it'll crack. But the nice part is when you have this much metal, it absorbs a lot of the heat and it doesn't actually let it crack. So I've poured gigantic pyramids in a single pour, but since I have enough metal in there, it is able to balance out the heat and it's able to cure properly. Keep going back and forth. And then today we're going to use a couple extra other stones as well. It's not necessary, but it adds to the signature of the piece and different effects and properties. So today I'm going to add some magnetite. This is the most magnetic material on the earth, and it's also in a double pyramid natural form, so I like that. Pardon me, I forget the exact name. I think it's an icosahedron, but I'm probably wrong with that, so don't listen to me. There you go. Add this guy, just plop him in there somewhere. Then you're going to want, today we're going to put some shungite and some tourmaline in here. It's a pretty big piece of shungite, so we're going to wait until later on that. But here's our black tourmaline. Just add a few pieces in here where you see fit. And then keep adding your metals. Let's just do another layer of metal on top of that. And then we'll do another layer of epoxy. And then once again, just keep mixing that bad boy. You don't want any blank spots that don't have epoxy inside of it. This is the best way to prevent that, just by constantly shaking it around in there. You can physically smack it a little bit to try and push the bubbles up. And then at the very end, I'm going to use our heat gun to pop all the bubbles that form inside. You can see it needs more metal, so we're going to add another layer. You'll just see how much it drinks the metal. Don't be afraid of that. I tend to go until it's borderline sticking out of the pyramid. It just helps it to compact, and the layers help to what am I saying here? You know what I'm doing right now. Keep adding more. We ran out in that cup, so we're just going to keep adding. You'll see this is going to be a pretty heavy pyramid, and it's also going to be quite powerful because of the amount of steel and the giant quartz inside of there. We might just skip the shungite today, because I don't think we're going to have room for it. Keep tapping along the top. Just keep trying pushing that metal down, also getting the epoxy work in there. And then we see that now we have a little bit more resin on the top still, so I'm going to put even just some more metal in here. All of this applies the same for charging plates, for smaller pieces, for pucks. It's the same process, just different molds. Pyramids are, I would say, superior. This is going to be a scale model replica of the Giza pyramid. Once again, Fine Molds has really good materials, good products. They have a bunch of different selections. I'd recommend shopping there. If you don't want to do that, you can even just find like an ice cube tray, or you can find just a muffin tray I know people use. That'll work as well to make the Orgonite, but I tend to choose the best option because why not? You see, we're almost to the top of our pour, so I'm going to add a little more metal. I'm going to end this off with a layer of steel, just pure steel. Give it a nice stable structure on the bottom, if you know what I mean. There you go. And then once again, mix away. And there you have it, an Orgonite pyramid. Technically, if you wanted to, you could just leave it like this for now. Also, denatured alcohol is really good for getting epoxy off of your hands. So if you don't want to have that sticky feeling, this is one of the best ways to go about it. Also, if you're recording on your phone while you're also simultaneously pouring, it really helps to get the excess epoxy off of that too. Here's our heat gun. Just turn it on. You're going to want to do a few layers of this multiple times. Wait like 5 minutes every time so you can let all the bubbles rise up and capture them. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with like an uneven surface on the bottom. You can see how all these bubbles are just disappearing as you go. There's also more that are coming up because the heat that's generating inside of the epoxy is pushing the bubbles up. And then this is why it's also always nice to have some extra small molds while you're pouring, because you don't want to waste epoxy. So we're just going to grab one of our Flower of Life molds right here. Push this guy off to the side. And then I'm just going to pour a little bit into here and show you the more or less same process with the other one. But here you go. So we got a little piece inside of here that I'm going to grab. A little styrofoam or something. Okay, for this one, let all of the epoxy soak in. So this has a Flower of Life mold on the top of it. Try and get all the epoxy pushed into those pieces at the end. Otherwise, you can have bubbles form on the inside of the Flower of Life, which has definitely happened to me before. It's not great. And then we put some... This one's going to have a smaller quartz, obviously, because of the size. So we're going to find a quartz that fits. Once again, you want it to be like 1 inch. Oh, this guy fits perfectly. So put that in the middle there. Grab your metals. Pour that layer in. You can see this is going to be poking up a little bit further out of the mold, which honestly is fine. You just want to try and let your epoxy completely cover it later on. So, second layer of epoxy. And you'll see we are covered. At this point, let this sit for a little bit. We still have a little bit extra epoxy, so I'm just going to make up another piece as well. But remember, use your heat gun. Get those bubbles out. And there you have it. There's your Orgonite. You're going to want to wait at least 24 hours for it to cure properly. After that time, we're going to jump to the unmolding. All right, so now it's time for the demolding. It's been a little over 24 hours, and you'll see, we'll take it out right here. And there's our pyramid. You can see the copper and the steel is all the way from the very tip to the bottom. It's not an issue if you don't see the quartz because you know it's in there because you put it in there. You'll notice that I wasn't exactly great with my heat gun and I ended up letting some bubbles get in there. That's what happens when you let it sit for a little bit too long, which is why I recommend popping the bubbles every 5 minutes or so. So take my advice, do what I do, not do what I say, not what I do. And then this guy, this is the transmuter that we had. We'll take this out and open it up. Look at that guy. You'll see that we're gonna have to sand the edges down a little bit. That's gonna help you have a smooth texture and surface. The last thing that you can do if you want to, this isn't necessary, but it's to polish, because you'll see this specific mold doesn't necessarily require polishing because it's pretty smooth, but you'll see some pyramids don't have a very clear surface. That can be solved by a very light sanding on the top, and then you just hit it with like a plastic polish or whatever you choose to find. One thing with my pyramids is that I focus on functionality much more than I focus on the look of it. That's why I don't really care too much to show the quartz exposed on the top. It's more a machine than it is an art piece. If you want to make it look prettier, you can spend the time and you can make sure the quartz is exposed on the top. You can add stones on the side. You can even pour in different layers. If you pour in layers though, make sure you have enough metal. You want to get that metal stacked up all the way to the top of the layer and even have it go past. And then in the second layer, you can do more metal and more epoxy. There's hundreds of different ways to do Orgonite. This is just how I choose to do it. And you can do many variations based off of what I do. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope that you learned a thing or two, and let me know down in the comments below. I'll also link my email in case you'd like to message me and show me what you made or have any other questions. Thank you very much.